Alright, hello everyone, my name is Disc, and in this video we have a level 14 Dawnbreaker. It was a really good queue overall, and this is going to be a nice upgrade from the 11 I think on my channel. But this was a really clean run overall, and we have a lot of really good examples of gameplay and spell usage, and I'm going to try and focus on in this video, especially since there's a lot of single target damage in here. There's a breaking point, probably around like the 13 level mark, where we really just have to adjust our playstyle to kind of fit the demand of the hierarchy. So, and it's all about like how we're going to be more defensive. That's personal defense and group defense. So a heavy focus on using Desperate Prayer and Fade anytime there's damage. And in Dawnbreaker especially, there's high single target damage. And a small adjustment we need to make in keys like this are to single target defense healing. So that could be repeated raptures into one person. I think we have a lot of good examples in here of defensive penance into one person. So we really have to kind of adjust our playstyle to account for the higher damage. But before we get into the video here, I wanted to quickly plug my Metafy. If you've not checked it out, please go check it out. I put a lot of work into upgrading the site recently, but this is an amazing website geared all around coaching for gamers. I am one of their sponsored instructors. We've been getting a lot done over there. I hope that my videos here serve a purpose for anyone who's watching, but a one-on-one environment is always going to be a little bit better of a scenario for you as the student to learn. So please go check it out. We can do one-on-one lecture. I also do video reviews. I think there is a lot of value in those. But like usual, I do want to kind of open with the talents here. So in talking about defensives, I wanted to kind of highlight this improved Fade 2 of 2. I think there's definitely a breaking point in higher keys where you need the 2 of 2. I think there's an argument in lower keys where you don't. I think just 1 of 2 is fine for both of those. But what this does basically is it makes our Fade 20 seconds. A lot of attacks are 20 seconds apart. So instead of being able to fade yourself for most attacks, you can kind of fade yourself for all attacks. And that's the idea here. Is neither of these spells operate on a global. There's no reason you shouldn't be practicing pressing them. To take it one step further, I have a macro for both of these together. And then there's really nothing else I want to talk about here except one thing. And I don't have it in this key. I've started doing it since this key. But I wanted to get the community's thoughts on this. It was actually one of my students who said something to me, and it was like the biggest light bulb moment. And I see a lot of utility in Prayer of Mending. I know that's like an off-ball kind of idea, but the alternative is Holy Nova. So I think I've shown examples of using Holy Nova, but you really are never pressing this in combat, much less out of combat. And the idea is if you like divert through Prayer of Mending, this at least gives you something you can press out of combat. I don't think there's an argument, except in some cases, to ever press this in combat, but it's something you can definitely add to your kind of out of combat rotation. I've been having a lot of good success with it. I think it's not too bad of an idea. And like, for example, you can always load Prayer of Mendings before a key starts. You can always load a Prayer of Mending walking between combat, or maybe second boss Siege of Borealis, when you're waiting for the boss to return to the field and you have nothing to smite, you don't need to atone yet. You could at least cast a Prayer of Mending, which does quite a bit for the ticking damage of those ricochets. But food for thought here, I've been toying with it now for a couple of days, and I see no argument against it. You know, especially since we're not playing Holy Nova. I mean, someone could maybe say, well, it's extra mana use, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. I've been having fun with it. I think it's a good idea, especially since Holy Nova just isn't something you play. And then last, before we clip over to the key, here is a splash of the damage. So 443,000 per second, pretty good number overall. We want to find an aggressive stance as a Disc Priest in order to get the HPS we need. It's kind of a dance between, you know, obviously offense and defense, but the more we can hit our pet rotation, the more we can send our rift, kind of like a 2-to-1 ratio, the more output we're going to have on both fronts. And then looking at the damage spread here, if you're comparing mine to yours, this is kind of what you need to see in all of your dungeons. You want the Wraith and the Entropic Rift vying for first and second, far in the lead above the next ones. And so Dark Reprimand, at least in this key, is next in line, really banking as much as we can into the Harsh Discipline for those extra bolts. Extra bolts empower Wheel and Woe, extra bolts empower the Rift, and then all the other spells kind of trailing behind. So this is going to be a really common ratio in what you should see in your keys. But again, as we're watching through this video, if you're really trying to min-max your gameplay, there's a handful of mini games, I call them, that we really need to try and maximize in order to get the most out of our spec. A lot of it has to do with switching targets. So our Shadow Word Death belongs on enemies sub 20%. Our Penance belongs on mobs that are holding a dot. And half the time we have a Schism out, which we need to be attacking. I use focus targeting, made a video dedicated to focus targeting if anyone's interested to watch that video. But then we have the mini game of getting our torments. We need to aim for 6, 7 and 8 when we can. 5 is still pretty common. Then we have to time our torments. So just because we have a good torment rotation, if they're not timed well, it doesn't really mean much. So using add-ons like Bigwigs sparingly in order to kind of help you better. And the very important minigame of using personal defenses. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and clip over to the key. All right, here we go. So I was just watching it through right before now just to make sure it's kind of in my head. This is a really exciting key, so I hope we can make some good calls here and show some good examples of spell play. But of course, the Enhancement Shaman is going to take the PI, so I'm watching really closely for his Ascendance. They're both 2-minute cooldowns. And on first pull here, I want to lead in with Healthy Atonements. I want to dot, let's see how many I get. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I dot 4, I find my focus target early, and you really just want to get your pet rift out ASAP. So here that goes. A couple changes to my UI. I've also added that it's an audible called Glass. For every dispel, I think it's kind of nice to have similar sounds for similar mechanics. It kind of helps the brain. Then also you might notice, I don't think I was in good practice of it here, but I added a UI element, and I think I'm going to pick at it, honestly, after I make this video. But anytime I'm targeted with something and have Shadow Meld available, I get a little icon and a noise. And I think, you have to be careful how you use Shadow Meld, but if you're low health, you know what I mean? Okay, so we definitely want to attack the commander here. This is an all spells played pull, whereas pull 1, we really don't play anything. So I lead with Barrier, I find my focus, and I get straight into my pet window. Still have Dispels. Important to note, Divine Star does not work on the moving ships, so there's no point in casting it, which is crazy. So my pet window is ending. Great time for Pain Sup. And it looks like I'm going for a second full window here. Let's see how I play it. Yeah, I'm just spending a little bit of time. Oh, wow. Okay, so I went for a half window. So a pretty common rule of thumb is you get 1 pet per any trash pull, but you can get 2 rifts. It kind of looked like I was setting up for a second full rotation, but I wasn't. And then food for thought, Prayer of Mending. Moments like this is when you can kind of stack those and have it be something that helps you in combat, but doesn't affect your combat. What was I saying before that? Okay, so on these pulls, we have targeted casts. My weak aura will highlight someone before they take the bomb. There's not upfront damage, but not a bad idea to kind of see where it's going. So here's our second PI before boss. And not too much in these pulls. We kind of have to keep atonements on the tanks. They do take bleeds. And then watch for the bombs in party. So depending. Yeah, so I took that one. I gave myself a Wheel and Woe shield ahead of time. And this is a Desperate Prayer and Fade. And with those 2 defensives rolling and my Protective Light, the atonement healing was really all I needed. My second rift is out. So talking about an out of combat rotation, it's something I started mentioning more in my videos. Like right here is a perfect time for Radiance. Go ahead and buy your proc. Perfect time to play a shield to get the CDR and Pain Sup. And if we have Prayer of Mending, not a bad time to play Prayer of Mending. I think it's a play I'm really liking so far. I don't see any reason not to take it, especially if you're only playing it out of combat. Pretty nice. Okay, so I find my focus early. See where the bomb is going. I'm not giving him any single target healing love. It's because I saw he had a defensive rolling. Arguably, he just took a bolt and almost died, but atonement healing for the win. I think we have some really good torment rotations here as well, so let's watch for that. And that was a bad example of a shadow meld, so this is not a mechanic that you can really mitigate. And it went right back to the Evoker, who was light on defensives. But to kind of apologize for that and make up for the greed, paints up on him to help him out. Also looks like he got an AMZ. Yeah, see how big that shield is? I think it's comboed with his own shield, but kind of seeing where those attacks are going before they land is crucial. So Radiance in between combat, a shield with my mount, Prayer of Mending, if I had it. And then on this boss, there's honestly 3 attacks we need to pay attention to. We need to bait the mechanic, which is the timer on his nameplate. And then we have 2 bar timers that have to do with the healing. So the Obsidian Beam is arguably a tank hit. You really want to use barriers on those, maybe a Rapture, a Pain Sup. And then when it comes to the Burning Shadows, the Dispel mechanic, you really want a Rift out at least, and set it to collapse after the Dispel. I believe, yeah, so the Rift is out, I Dispel, the Rift has 2 penance. The collapse recovered all of the heal absorbs, which are marked as pink on the bars, and I preemptively laid a barrier that I think at least 3 of us were in. And it was primarily for the tank, but it does, cover everybody. Anyone who's in it. Okay, so we have a Dispel, the Rift and Pet are out. We're set for the collapse to happen after the Dispel. Fully covered. So moments like this, again, we could cast Prayer of Mending, shield with our mount, Radiance. All of these things which can subtly help us in combat. Aerial Halt for the win. And then you want to do a Surge in. And I'm looking at my pet, 10 seconds away. I think I go for just a couple smites, yeah. So gripped the Evoker over so we could kind of consolidate those mechanics. We're about to have a Dispel mechanic, which I'm covering with a pet and a Rift. And arguably, this looks like quite a bad overlap of mechanics. So I did reach for a Pain Sup on the tank there. We also can see the tank slam coming with the targeted cast Weakar. He highlights white. And I think without that Pain Sup, he would have died. Even with it, he chunked, I think, sub 50%. So for that tank hit, I led in with just 1 Rapture Shield. So now it looks like we're in a good spot here to go for a full rotation. Dispel. Atonements in party. Pet. 2 deaths. Rift Penance. So let's see how many torments I get. I'm trying to set up for an 8 here, but not always possible. Working a Radiance. Okay, so we got 7. So on bosses, really good opportunity to try and aim for that 8. And then here is a little bit tricky because we have dots in party and people are flying away. So if that ever happens, we can't heal through Atonement anymore. I think that's a break in the code, to be honest. But you have to kind of just flash heal those off quickly. Radiance, things like that. Okay, so going to this next pull, it is a key pull for the dungeon. It kind of sets the tone for the rest of it. It's a big pull, and we have to live. So watch what happens. Take you down. Okay, so we have a pretty common attack here where it hits 2 people at once. We also have 3 cooldowns on nameplate. Those are AoEs for the group. We kind of have to keep an eye on those. I also led in with a healthy amount of dots since it's a pretty big and long pull. And I have the rift. No pet yet. Let's see how I do this. I pick the first target I can. Honestly, you had to. And I send just the half rotation with a barrier. And upcoming here is a pretty niche play of Paints Up just because I don't have pet or rift. So I Paints Up myself and start flash healing others. That's the binding heals, getting all of the atonements out and preparing for my last rotation. And here I think we go another pet rotation. Yep, so pet, death, death, rift, penance. And it looks like I'm setting up for an 8. Let's see if I get it. I'm a little bit sus on the DK's AMZs. I've not seen him time a good one yet. Okay, 7 torments, pretty good. So the idea with barrier, AMZ, things like that, Zephyr even, you want them to happen even before the first tick of damage. You don't really want to cast them during ticking damage. You want it cast immediately before the ticking damage. And I think he's kind of late on all of them. Okay, so we have single target hits on this mini-boss. We can track that on his nameplate, and we can also track where the attack is going, targeted cast weak R and party, and this is just a full send. Defensives if you're picked, Paints Ups if other people are picked, Raptures. Okay, so I started a Rapture on this guy, letting the Atonement healing fill in. I think that's mainly because I see he's holding a sack. Then gave one more Rapture Shield to cover the upfront on the Death Knight. Just farming back my pet. So I have my pet here. Let's see how I do it. Raptured the upfront of that one as well, followed by pet. I remember that too. So I give myself a huge Wheel and Woe Rapture. Just guessing because my Rapture was expiring. And I think it goes fully to waste. So in a case like that, I was kind of letting the Shaman dip low so I could life him. And so I'm finally picked. This is not a good attack to Shadow Meld. So both of my defensives, Desperate Prayer and Fade, and a defensive penance into myself. A defensive penance proc. So a defensive penance standard, not that great. But when it's a Harsh Discipline proc, there was another one that is quite substantial single target healing. In Food for Thought, you can give someone a defensive penance followed by a shield, which is now dipping into Wheel and Woe. So it's a lot of single target you can do that way. So I really like the tank's route here. Let's pay attention to this. So we have big mini boss here. Don't have much mana. So let's see. I should drink immediately. Yep. And we want to track kind of 2 spells here. We really want the pet and or rift out for the group attack. And then we also have to pay attention to the single target attacks, which same as before, either take personal defensives, Paints Ups, Raptures. So that was really good timing on the first pet. I kind of delayed him so that he would be out to recover after the group-wide hit. So a Paints Up and a defensive Dark Reprimand into myself just to recover from that one. And even though I have Barrier here and we're about to get hit, since the mini-boss is dying, I'm kind of just holding out because it's not too hard to recover health after the pull. Or you could play a Prayer of Mending right here. Okay, and then going into this pull... Oh wait, it's this one, I forgot. Okay, so we do have some good things we can talk about here. So just some pretty basic trash pulls. We're going to aim for 1.5 rotations. That's just kind of what I'm calling it. So it's 1 pet, 2 rifts. Opening with, what is that, 3 dots of 5, letting my penance do the rest. And then pet. Death. I'm sorry. So it's pet, death, rift, penance, and we spam smite for the second penance. Then we spam a couple more smites because they're still void blasts. And then we backload the final death and penance for 6 torrents. Okay, so here goes the half rotation. Let in with a Radiance just to amplify the Rift. Switch my target to spread my dots. And I think I go for one more half rotation here, which is just a pure damage grab. And anticipating it's not going to get its full value, I high prio the second penance. And immediately after the channel, cancel. And then it's 5 seconds away. So it's a pretty free spell to play. So I did not want to play the pet there, but I had one more rift and it's already available. So on this pull, the way you want to do it is if you have barrier, depending on the route, play it immediately. And then with barrier, I only go for one other minor defensive. I just play the fade, holding on to the desperate prayer. There is PI plus pet plus rift. Radiance during the window. And we're tracking the bar timer of the AoE hit and the single target on the nameplate. There's a Rapture just to help out a little. Plus a Pain Sup since there was an overlap. A lot of times you have to kind of be ready for those overlaps and give something extra. These mini bosses, when they start having 2 attacks each. And this was a little bit weird on my rotation, if anyone noticed. So I was just trying to get a little extra value, and I played a half rotation without the pet, and then I played the pet without the rift. Just trying to get a little extra value instead of sitting on one for too long. And close out that pull with just Smite Spam, trying to prepare my pet to be ready again. Alright, here's where I would Prayer of Mending. No halt. So in these pulls, another kind of basic trash pull, we don't have to watch for too much. We really just want to make sure we hit a strong offensive rotation. So I have all but 2 dotted, letting my penance spread my final 2. Notice how I'm giving a lot of attention to an atonement ramp. I gave long atonements plus a shield. Then I go into my pet window, confident that the party is atoned, planning a radiance in the middle. Switch my target for executes. And 6 torments. Kept my dot spread with the penance. And I believe on this one I go for a second full rotation. So let's see how that goes. I'm just spamming smite to get the pet back. Renew on the tank very last. 2 executes for the win. And something interesting to note on that one. So I caught the execute who was kind of separated from the mob. And then I gave the second execute to my focus target who was kind of grouped with others. So whereas the Shadow Word Death, 7 torments, the Shadow Word Death could have done better on the execute, but then the torments were going to be missing since he was isolated. So something you kind of got to think about sometimes is making sure your torments go into a group of mobs. And similar, there was a final rift just for the damage grab, sent my second penance into it and collapse. Radiance out of combat. Shield mount. Also could cast a Prayer of Mending. And then going into this boss, I think this is my favorite boss in the game right now. It is a really fun boss that pairs well with our timing, our spells. So you kind of just have to understand that in the middle of the fight, there's a change of rhythm. So it's group hit, taking damage, group hit, taking damage, group hit, taking damage. And how we approach that is kind of a full send. So I always like having a single shield on myself, anticipating the group hit, at least shield someone. And you want to play your pet death rift penance immediately after the group hit. So here goes the pet and rift. Zephyr is queued with my fade. Radiance was worked in. And the collapse recovers it all. 6 torments. So in this phase, good idea to play star. You really want to make sure you have a dot active on the boss. And high prio is farm back the CDR of the pet. So we just got the pet back, and same as last time, we play the pet Death Rift Penance right after the group hit. Q and Fade, Q in my Radiance. Six Torrents. So here is where the rhythm changes, and we have 2 hits in a row. The first one we can cover with a half rotation, just a Rift. I precast a Radiance on top of it, straight into the half rotation, the Rift. Gave the shield to the tank there for a single target hit. And then here comes the all-in. So I Radiance into a Rapture, banking on the Mastery, banking a Harsh Discipline proc, and anticipating the hit with the ticking damage to follow. Preemptively lay a barrier, Desperate Prayer and Fade, Pet, Rift, and Vampiric Embrace, working in a Radiance, and it's full coverage. Another shield, anticipating that tank hit. It looked like it was a slight miss, but even a big shield after a tank hit still gives them a moment to recover. So here we're about to hit sub 20. Let's see how I play it. Single shield on myself, anticipating the attack. And here's sub 20. So Pet, Death, Death, Rift, Penance. Working my Radiance. Here's a second PI. Zephyr is queued with Fade. Six, 7, and 8 Torments for the win. Single shield on myself. It looks like I'm going for a final full rotation here. Yep. So I'm just giving a Hail Mary for damage since the boss is dying. I'm sending one more Pet Rift window just for the damage grab. Collapsed it early to make sure it didn't miss. And totally good. So the only thing to consider if you play a late pet like that, notice mine is 30 seconds away. That is not great, but we have a little time to kill here. I'm faded, so I'm not going to pull those guys. Wait, they were mind soothed. Okay, so I'm just smiting to get my pet back. Setting up for a full rotation window here. Pet Death, Rift, Penance. I see an execute coming up. Double execute on the latter half of the window. And 7 Torments for the win. Here goes a half rotation. Let's see. Likely not going to get full value here, so I probably collapse it after the second Penance. Let's see how I play it. Yep, give it the second Penance and collapse. Just for the damage grab. Your bomb. Radiance out of combat. Prayer of Mending out of combat. I actually can't wait to show my video with that. I don't know if I'm like really onto something and that's like the sleeper build of Disc, but no one else is playing it, and especially when you don't even cast Holy Nova. Okay, so we have mini boss here. Hurts pretty bad. There's damage that comes out pretty quick. A full atonement ramp in party. Straight into the Pet Rift, and you really have to do it kind of as quickly as you can. And then we have Barrier, we have Rapture and Paints Up. Tracking the attack on his nameplate. Let's see how I do the next one. Rapture to cover a couple. Holding on to the rest. The pet is 4 seconds away. Okay, pet's back. A little low on that one, but I had a Rapture for myself. It also looks like the tank gave me a couple of logs, which I always appreciate. And 8 Torments again for the win. So it looks like I lost my dot spread, but that is a minor critique. You know, in a 3 target pull right here, 3 dots is better than 0 dots. Alright, now we have boss, so noticing on his nameplate, those are our thresholds we're trying to hit for the phases. And this attack, you really want to shield the person if you can. It's a private aura, so you can't really see it in the party frames. But with party nameplates, you can kind of see who's selected with the wave. And we really want a pet and a rift for each one of those spray attacks. That one was paired with Vampiric Embrace. Gave the Death Knight a shield there before the hit. And really just want to fap for Smite here a little bit. And although we don't have a full rotation to give, we still have a half rotation. So I barrier right before the damage. Cue in my rift. Really just aiming for 2 penance here. Worked in my radiance. Shielded the Shaman who was picked. And it's a good idea to play barrier up here because this fight is kind of long enough, especially with this little intermission phase. We'll get it again, and I do believe I get it on boss downstairs. And the play of spells downstairs is a little bit like a Hail Mary. It's a little chaotic. You kind of just have to play as you can. If you play your cards perfectly right, you should be able to have a pet and rift for every spray. That is kind of what you want to aim for. And then you can also use Raptures to cover for the webs. You can use Barrier if you kind of fall behind. Not a bad idea to kind of charge up here. So notice I have a 2 stack on the Harsh Discipline. I could also be charging Prayer of Mendings. I could be casting shields for the CDR, which I'm not. And the first spray attack is about, I think, 30 seconds away. Generally not enough time to cast a pet, but since this is with Lust, I do cast a pet and a rift here. And I'm really trying to get the value, get the damage grab. If this were a key for IO, I would probably just cast the rift there to kind of recover after the webs and reserve my pet and rift for the spray. So let's see, spray is 5 seconds away, pet is 8. Let's see how I do it. So dot is out, Desperate Prayer and Fade are used. Pet and rift with no other modifier. Looks like we have Zephyr rolling. So that was a 5 torment window and you kind of just got to move on. Precast a Radiance on top of the webs. Pet is 10 seconds away, attack is 4. So let's see, you just kind of have to spam Smite, ramping with Long Atonements and Party. And for this one, I fade and Paints up myself, working my Radiance like always. And so now, high prio is get the pet back. We really have to do our best to spam for CDR. Shielding ahead of the wave attack. And I'm forfeiting all spells except Smite. I'm just smiting. And for this attack, I was running a little bit late. So what you can do, it's something I've been trying to get better at recently, but planning health pots. So knowing that I was going to be a little bit behind, you know, I would have a pet and a rift, which is all we would need if I could just get there. Plan a health pot, and it's a really nice way to kind of just help everyone, to be honest. And so for this one, I was running behind further. My pet was 10 seconds away, so this is an opportunity where you can throw in barrier just to compensate. So that was a barrier with just a rift. Sending the pet there at the end just for a little extra. But this was a really good key overall. I hope I was able to highlight some examples of how we can approach healing with a little bit different of a style, using our spells differently to cover these single target hits. It is a pretty specific dungeon when it comes to the damage profiles, and kind of being malleable with how our spells work and using them a little bit differently to keep these single target hit people alive really does mean a lot. And then also it's really all about timing. So it's something I focus on in my lessons. I talk about it in my videos, but using big wigs and this add-on for cooldowns on nameplate is honestly best used sparingly. You only really want to track attacks that have to do with timing your spells. But again, check me out on Metafy if you're interested in a one-on-one private lesson. I also do video reviews. Been getting a lot done over there. I've been having a lot of fun doing it. Also, if you're interested in any of my UI elements, please consider joining the channel as a member. But until next time, Disc.